What is up, you guys? Temps here, coming at you with a new tutorial. I know it's been a while since my last upload, been a few months, but I'm coming back to, start uploading again, hopefully a little bit more regularly. So let's just get right into this. So today what we're going to be working on, if I can find it here, is recreating this setup right here, if I turn this off real quick. So we're going to create the Gfuel tub, we're going to create the lighting, and we're going to create some other stuff. I'll throw a preview up on the screen of what the actual render looks like, just because it does take a while to render out. With my render settings on here, you can see I have pretty much everything cranked up as high as it can go to get a really nice photorealistic render with some really nice lighting without using any external plugins or any external renderers or render softwares. I know a lot of people have been using Octane, V-Ray, stuff like that. However, this is going to be an alternative to that. So if you want to, do some product visualization, make some advertisements, stuff like that, and you don't have those softwares, you can't afford those softwares, this is going to be the way around that. So let's start off by just making a new document. Let's start off with actually setting up our Gfuel tub. I'm actually just going to copy my materials over just for reference. So all my labels, and that should be good. Let me just make sure I have the right materials. So I use mat 1 and that, okay. And let's go back into our new empty blank document. I'm just going to paste my materials in. The materials themselves are pretty easy to create. If you don't have these images, I'll have a link to them in the description. There's the Gfuel labels. I tweeted a couple of them out. So let's start modeling. The black ones are really just black with a specular and one with a reflection. I think one might have a bump as well. Yeah, they're really just basic black materials, nothing special. The model itself is actually pretty simple. If you just go ahead and grab a cylinder, I always turn my rotation segments up just to give you a nice, round look. I'm gonna go about to 75. Now you don't have to follow this exactly. This is, just for tutorial purposes, so it might not be perfect. So I'm gonna increase my height, say about 280, and my radius about, let's do 150, just to round it off. Maybe increase the height a little bit more if it's looking a little bit too short. And then we're gonna go to our caps and turn on fillet. Now you'll see with the radius, kind of starts to smooth everything out. We're going to want to crank that radius up a little bit, just because if you look at the Gfuel tub, it's actually really rounded at the top and bottom, and that should be good. Let me just go back here to compare. Yeah, that'll be fine. Maybe even turn it down a little bit. You can also increase the segments and increase the height as needed. And I'm actually just going to hit Control and click and drag the cylinder up above. That way we have an exact duplicate, and I'm going to turn the height down. Now if I drag this one up, and let's turn the height down even more. We turn our radius down on our caps, and turn our overall radius up. Definitely got to bring the height down even more. And maybe turn our radius back up, and our cap radius down a little bit. This is really just, playing around, finding what sizes work. Obviously, if you use a Gfuel tub as a reference image, it would probably help a lot. But again, this is just for tutorial purposes, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Yeah, I'm actually going to increase the radius a little bit more on our cap, just so it hangs off. That might be too much. And turn our radius on our fillet, let's make it about 2. And you can't really tell here, but anytime you do put a fillet on a cylinder or really any other object, so say you did a tube with a 0 inner radius, it always kind of creates this weird kind of indent on the top. I couldn't tell you why. It's really just based off geometry and how everything works within Cinema 4D. But it's fine, because if you ever looked at really any plastic lid or like the bottom of like a plastic bottle, you'll see that there is a kind of like a little indent or little piece sticking out. So it actually kind of makes it look a little bit more natural, a little bit more realistic. So don't worry too much about that. And this is actually not looking great, but again, doing it for tutorial, so obviously you can spend a lot more time playing around with what numbers are going to look good, you know, what height looks the best, what radius looks the best, all that stuff. It's up to you. I will have a link in the description to my actual finished model if you want to download that. It's got my Lightroom, all of that. It's on my Selfie. You just need to send out a tweet and you get it for free. And that should be good for now. So let's just copy this cylinder one more time. And let's turn our radius up by, not even by 1, let's do by 0.75. Turn our height about there. And just turn off the fillet. And turn down our height again. And now we can start texturing. So throw this one on our actual tube or our tub. Let me see how I did this. Did that one and material. Okay. So I had material 1 on both of these. They're kind of like a nice gray base tone, and that's already on there. And then I had my reflective material on there. You can keep them on UVW mapping. Now if we throw a label on this cylinder and you leave it on UVW mapping, it's actually going to hopefully be perfectly wrapped around our model. So there's that. Now if we head back in here, you can see I have this Skylight. This is actually from a HDRI studio pack I have. So I can't really go too into detail as to how to create that because honestly I'm not entirely sure. But again, it is in the link in my in the description on my Selfie. So again, just tweet it out, you get it for free. But then this is going to be right here, one of the most important things that I don't see a lot of people using. Let me just copy the Skylight over just so we have some solid lighting in here. Is this sky. So a lot of people will use a sky as like an HDRI. They'll just hit sky. However, if you're using a physical sky, you get a much better result. So it's actually really easy to get a nice physical sky in there without doing too much work. So if you actually go into your presets in your content browser, you'll see a folder called Sky. This is default with any version of Cinema 4D that I've ever worked in. And if you just go to Skies, you just get all these presets right here. And it's really up to you which one do you think is going to look best. What I recommend is, you know, stick away from this, stick away from like Miami Vice, stick away from the Happy Day, stick away from anything that looks really cartoony. These might be nice for some things, depends. Go for something bright, or either something really bright or something with like a lot of highlights. So this Invasion 2 here might be nice for like a nighttime scene. This Ice Needles might be good for some rain or again nighttime. But it is really up to how you want to have it set up. So what I normally go with is right here, this like little volume cloud, or I'll go with the cotton candy preset right here. But if you go for the volume cloud, you'll see it's actually going to open up in its own little studio. Just copy this, Control C, go back to our product, and paste it in there. Now what we want to do is go in here. You'll see we have actual clouds. Delete that, because in your render that's actually not going to look great unless you really know what you're doing and know how to treat it. Just trust me on that one. Don't try it unless you know how to do it. I mean, you can try it and then work on learning, but it's not going to look good if you just throw it on there. So let's go to our Cinema 4D tags real quick, just by clicking tags, Cinema 4D tags, grab a compositing tag. And real quick, we're just going to turn off scene by camera, and that's about it for our lighting. You'll see it looks really dark, but that's just because of how the physical sky works. It, you know, gives us a light point, but this skylight right here is going to light everything. This is going to create some natural lighting, some more realistic lighting, which gives us that kind of, you know, Octane or V-Ray style render without any external software or any additional software. So now let's go into our render settings, and this is where you can really take your renders to another level. So you start off in the standard renderer most of the time, unless you have some other setting set up. What I do is just change that to physical. You'll see in this right here, it is on standard. That's just because I was trying out a few different things. But physical renderer is going to give you a much better result if you have the patience. So I set my width and height to 1920 by 1080. Just want to make sure I'm rendering only this frame. Obviously, if you're doing an animation, you can change that. For the resolution, you can leave it at 72. I normally crank that way up to 300, but for tutorial purposes, leave it at 72. Just because most people's computers, it's about what they can handle, at least within a timely fashion. Multipass, you don't need to worry about. Anti-aliasing, just leave that as is. And if we go into our physical, we can turn on depth of field. Right now, we don't really need it just because it's only one item. There's no way to really get, I mean, we can get depth of field, but it's not going to really do much without anything in the background. So for our sampler, what we're going to want to do is set it to adaptive, set our sampling quality to high. Don't worry about any of these numbers here unless you want to change them. You can turn up the shadow subdivision. I normally just crank it up a little bit. But now we want to go into our effects, throw ambient occlusion on there, turn our contrast up just a little bit. Let's go into global illumination. Now this is really up to you if you want to do this, because I will say it's going to really add a lot of time onto your render setting, or your render time rather. But if you go to your radiance cache, just put everything on high. This one I do high details. Interpolation, just leave that as it is. Obviously, if you know what different settings do, you can change and play around. Smoothing, turn that to very heavy. Cache refinement, high or very high, depending on what you want to do. Oversampling, I normally do heavy. Don't worry about any of these. You can obviously play around with them if you'd like. Don't worry about that. That doesn't do much. And I'd always turn on reflective caustics, just because I think it looks a little bit better. And I feel like I'm missing something. Might not be. Nope, should be good. Just make sure everything looks good here. And this is one of the things that I normally do. Isn't necessarily necessary. Just throw on caustics. Turn the strength down to about 30, 35. And that's just going to add, it's just going to make it look a little bit better. And recompute, do that on the first time like it was. Oh. Alright, turn that back on to 30. And I'm just going to look through my settings, make sure everything looks how I want it. And that should be all set. So obviously, depending on how your computer runs and what you're running for hardware-wise, so I'm actually running on an internal GPU. It's an AMD card. It's a lower-end card, and I'm running on an AMD A6 processor. It's overclocked to about 3.6, but it's not the fastest card. It definitely still takes me a while to render, usually about 45 minutes for stuff like this. So obviously the other softwares, if you have a decent graphics card, are going to render faster, but this is kind of like the alternative. So instead of actually letting this render out and letting you watch that, I was going to cut this video off here. So I hope you enjoyed. Again, check out the links in the description. Going to have a link to my Selfie with this finished product. Not this one here. It's going to be this here. So it's going to be the finished Lightroom. It's got, some really nice lighting. Everything's set up pretty much perfectly for photorealistic renders. So even if you don't want to use this Gfuel tub, maybe if you have, some other model that you want to use, even just, some text, something like that, you can go ahead and do that. Also going to have a link to my Twitter. Go ahead and give me a follow on there if you enjoyed this video and want to support me even more. Yeah, if you want to purchase any work, or if you're interested in purchasing an intro or other designs, even if you just want to tweet some of your work at me, just let me know.